Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rechak Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Isaiah, the 13th chapter. And as you can see in the subheading here, prophecies about Babylon. And when we went into Isaiah 12, right, it was mainly about the rejoicing in the salvation of Israel. Okay, and now in 13, it deals more so with the future judgment that would come upon the future or prophetic Babylon, which we know today as America or Babylon the Great. So this is the book of Isaiah, chapter 13, verse 1. The burden of Babylon, which Isaiah, the son of Amos, did see. Now, at the time, right, of Isaiah prophesying and being on the scene, the Neo-Babylonian Empire, right, which was founded by Nabopolassar, the father of Nebuchadnezzar II, and then, Nebuchadnezzar is really known for being that one of those main kings of that empire. They hadn't come up into power yet, right? They hadn't come up into power just yet. However, you may have certain individuals that'll be confused, and they'll try to link this chapter and they'll try to find how the things and judgments that Isaiah mentions in this chapter link historically to ancient Babylon. But as you keep reading the chapter, you'll find out that it was not so. Okay, and you can't find historical accounts that'll allow you to link this to ancient Babylon, which points to this Babylon referring to a different Babylon, not that of the ancient Neo-Babylonian Empire. So it says here, verse 2, lift ye up a banner upon the high mountain, exalt the voice unto them, shake the hand, that they may go into the gates of the nobles. Now, as we read in Isaiah, remember that at least Isaiah the 13th chapter, keeping in mind that Isaiah, at least in the way his writings were, he was pretty eloquent and did speak in sort of a poetic / metaphorical sense, right? He used a lot of analogies, he used a lot of examples to liken the judgment of the Lord or the word of the Lord to certain things. And as we read here, the visual, right, that is sort of given in at least in the second verse and a few other verses, is likened on to basically the Lord commanding an army, right, or rallying an army together to march upon the enemy, right, and basically take them over. So in the literal sense of the image, right, lifting up the banner upon the high mountain is likening on to basically raising like a flag or a signal as a sort of like a rallying point. And it's on a high mountain that everybody can see it. Okay, as it says, exalt the voice onto them, shake the hand. So here you can imagine, like on a battlefield or whatever the case would be, you would have that whoever it is that's leading it sort of exhorting his army, right, with a loud voice and directing them, right, in terms of like marching on and going so on and so forth, that they may go into the gates of the nobles. So like in actual war, they would actually go and take over pretty much everything all the way up until the actual nobility of the enemy there. Now, this visual is represented this way, but the way it applies now is, us, as it says, lift ye up the banner upon the high mountain. And so we're not lifting up an actual flag, right, or a war signal per se, but the banner, right, or the rallying point that we are lifting up is the scriptures. Okay, and the high mountain here would represent Babylon the Great or America. Okay, and we know when you go into the word mountain, there's times in the scriptures where mountain represents a physical mountain, and there are times when mountains and or hills represent a body of a government, right, or a ruling body. Okay, so here that high mountain would be likened onto Babylon or America, which I believe it's in, I forget which chapter exactly. It might be Jeremiah, maybe around 50th or 51st chapter or so, but it refers to how Babylon is going to become a burnt mountain, right? And I believe it might be in Jeremiah, if I'm not mistaken. Um, so by us prophesying here, that is likened unto us lifting up that banner. Okay, as it says, exalt the voice onto them, shake the hand. So we are not standing on a battlefield per se, trying to command an army, but by coming out here and lifting up our voice like a trumpet and teaching the word of the Lord, right? That is likened unto um, exhorting, right, or calling together the people of the Lord, right, the elect. And when you go into the book of Ezekiel, the 37th chapter, that's sort of the visual that is also there, right? When it talks about when you get to the stage where the breath entered into them, and then they stood upon their feet an exceeding great army, right? That breath being the spirit of the Lord by way of the scriptures is going out via the prophets, right? By us prophesying and teaching, the Lord is carrying that word all throughout the earth, and it's entering into um, the those dry bones, right? So as it says, and shake the hand that they may go in to the gates of the nobles. So like I said, we're not marching out here into their these high ranking officials as places of congregation or their homes or anything of that sort. However, the way we are making it to the gates of the nobles is by the effect of what we're doing, right? By us teaching, starting with our elders and apostles, and even their elders, all the way on down. That teaching has caused a great awakening in the earth, right? Which has led to that effect to where now they even have their politicians or high ones, as they would speak, have meetings and they host gatherings to discuss and also have documents or documentation to discuss the effects of the teachings of the prophets and how it's waking people up and how a lot more people are now being awoken, right? Like that army, right? We're not army in a carnal sense, but that spiritual army, similar to what is written in Ezekiel the 37th chapter. Okay, so that the sign or the effect of what we're doing has made its way up, even all the way up until the gates of the nobles. Verse 13 says, I have commanded my sanctified ones. I have also called my mighty ones for mine anger. And so the sanctified ones would be the prophets, right? The teachers who have been made holy, separated, right? And the Lord has put that spirit of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding into them to where they can teach, right, the correct truth of the doctrine of the scriptures. Okay, so the Lord has commanded us to teach, to prophesy. And as it says, I have also called my mighty ones for mine anger. And the mighty ones are the angels, all right, because they are the ones who are going to be doing, some of the other heavy lifting, right? Our job is to prophesy, which we're doing, but the Lord has the angels, which some are prepared to come, right, with Yahushai when it's go time. But you also have some angels whose jobs it is to go throughout the earth and have certain things happen, right? Have certain events happen. And then you also have some angels that are on standby, right? As the scriptures tell you, that are prepared for a certain period of time to make something happen. I'll continue. It says, even them that rejoice in my highness. And when you read in the book of Revelation, right, in the various chapters, you get the visual of the angels that constantly worship the Lord and rejoice, right, in the presence of the Lord, as they have been basically programmed, for lack of a better word, to do. So right here, what we're seeing here is the Lord pretty much via this vision that he has given Isaiah, mustering up a host, right, to come against Babylon, right, that judgment that's about to come upon Babylon. Verse 4 says, the noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people. So once again, going into that visual of like an army that's being mustered to take over or to invade or to go and attack and destroy the target or the enemy. So as it says, the noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts mustereth the host of the battle. And now you notice how it says, like as of a great people, right? So this visual of this army, or this gathering of these kingdoms, or this great people that have been mustered together, right, by the Heavenly Father, it's not going to be, in this case, actual people, all right, but it's going to be the nuclear missiles. Okay, those are the weapons that the Lord is going to use, that He has gathered as part of His army, that He is going to use to bring an end to this place. And verse 5 expounds on that, right? So it keeps the context. It says, they shall come from, or they come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even the Lord and the weapons of His indignation. So it's telling you who is the same day that is the subject of the 4th verse, and that is the Lord and the weapons of His indignation, right? So you have the prophets that are prophesying, you have the angels that the Lord has set up, ready to do what He has commanded, a part of His army, and you also have the weapons of His indignation, which are ultimately the intercontinental ballistic missiles. All right. And that's why it mentions them coming from a far country. And the way that they're going to come from a far country is by being launched from their silos, from these various nations that are going to be in war against this place. So as it says here, even the Lord and the weapons of His indignation to destroy the whole land. So those weapons that are going to be shot off, hence they're known as intercontinental ballistic missiles, are going to be shot off to destroy the whole land, which is Babylon. So that is point number 1 on how this Babylon is not referring to ancient Babylon, because the region of ancient Babylon is still here today, and it's still inhabited. And when it was an empire and it got taken down, the whole land wasn't destroyed. As a matter of fact, when Israel came back into the land to rebuild the temple, that was by decree of Cyrus. Guess what? They left from Babylon to go and start building the temple. And then they were prohibited for a period of time after Cyrus died. And guess where they were? Back in Babylon. And then it wasn't until the time of Darius where Zerubbabel sought permission to go back and finish building the temple. So at that point in time, the Babylonian Empire had been taken down. So if the land was destroyed, how would Israelites still be in Babylon at that time? Even when Ezra, much like later on, when Ezra ended up leading certain Israelites out back into the land, they left from Babylon. So how would that be the case if the whole land was destroyed? So the whole land that's talking about here is really dealing with America, all right, or the modern day Babylon. Verse 6, howl ye, for the day of the Lord Yahweh is at hand. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty, right? So the Most High has appointed this destruction for a certain time. And it's saying, Isaiah is saying howl, because it's going to be a very crazy, scary, and destructive time. Therefore shall all hands be faint, and every man's heart shall melt. And all hands being faint is likened unto being paralyzed, not by physical constraint, but more so by fear. And that's what it goes into. Every man's heart shall melt. The word heart in the Hebrew here, as they have it as labab, meaning your inner mind or inner man, your will, right? Your soul, the seat of emotions, passions, as seat of courage. And as it says, every man's heart shall melt. And when you go into the word melt over there, right, one of the definitions there is to grow fearful, right, figuratively. So your brain is not going to actually melt unless you're in the fire, the lake of fire, which is not somewhere in, it's America, let's put it like that, on fire. But the way their heart is going to melt is by them basically being like paralyzed through fear of all the things that the Lord is going to be bringing upon this place. Verse 8, and they shall be afraid. Pangs which is like distress and anguish, and sorrows shall take hold of them. So they're going to be gripped with that fear and that agony. They shall be in pain as a woman that travaileth. They shall be amazed one at another. Their faces shall be as flames. So they're going to basically be in shock. You're going to have a lot of people that are in shock, that can't believe what's going on, that are afraid, that can't even comprehend or begin to comprehend what is happening because of the shock of the judgment that the Lord is going to bring. All this, because America, right, at its point right now, and I think that America is still, there's still one part, right? There's still a little bit left for them to do, right, as Babylon before they go down, right? So that they can really hit the peak, right, the zenith of their empire and then be brought down. So from that point in time, when people are looking at the destruction that's coming, they're looking at all the things happening, they're going to be afraid and in shock. Because for some of these people, a lot of them, it's not even in their furthest thoughts that this is the kind of judgment that would come upon this place. They think this place is going to continue forever. They don't think that this place is going to go, they think they're going to die before America would be destroyed, if anything. So when the Lord starts to bring these very intense judgments, a lot of people are going to be very messed up. Verse 9, behold, the day of the Lord Yahweh cometh cruel, both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he shall destroy the sinners thereof out of it. See? And this is the judgment that the Lord has planned for this place. And as it says, it's going to become cruel, both with wrath and fierce anger. So those that the Lord has preordained to be judged, there will be no mercy for them. Okay, and it's not no amount of prayers or screaming or begging for mercy is going to deliver you if the Lord has set you up to be destroyed. And that's why it's looked at as cruel, because there's this ruthless judgment that there's no way around save you have already been marked as exempt. And it is to showcase the fierceness of the anger of the Lord. So much so that when he's done with it, there's going to be no life on the soils of America, right, at that point when that judgment comes, because it's going to be a lake of fire. And it's going to take a long time for it to eventually start to, that fire to start to die down. But at that point in time of that judgment, it's going to be desolate. As it says, and he shall destroy the sinners thereof out of it. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. And so if you've ever been in a war zone or you've watched movies like that, typically, or, you would have bombs, explosions, and all of that hit, fires, and so on. And then it starts to create this cloud, right? It starts to create this darkness in the air to where it could be like broad daylight as they speak, or as they say, or even in the daytime, but the clouds and the thickness, right, of the smoke is blocking out pretty much like the sun to where it looks like it's dark. All right, some places you have like that what's that thing called? It's like the orangish sky from the fires and everything. So Isaiah is given a visual here of the darkness and the destruction that's going to be taking place at this time when the judgment comes forth upon Babylon. And that's why it says here, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. Verse 11, and I will punish the world for their evil and the wicked for their iniquity. And I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. Now, when you go back to the time of ancient Babylon and they were taken down, it wasn't in this fashion, right? And the downfall of the Neo-Babylonian Empire wasn't known as the Day of the Lord. Okay, it didn't come cruelly to destroy the sinners thereof out of it. And as a matter of fact, it didn't it didn't cause arrogancy to cease, and it wasn't a punishment of the world. It was really just another fulfillment of prophecy, a transition from one empire to another. But in this time, this judgment is going to cause these effects. And as a result, right, I will make a man more precious than fine gold, even a man than the golden wedge of Ophir. Now, why does it say that? Because at this point, with the amount of destruction and death that's going to be all over the place, one, you're going to have a scarcity of men, but the kind of men that are going to be valued in that time are going to be the men of the Lord. Okay, the Israelite men of the Lord, because one, they're going to be the ones that are going to be able to survive. All right. And two, they're going to be the ones that are going to have the Spirit of the Lord with them, making them precious, making them able to protect and provide for, and to, have that stability of mind and have that peace around them, though everything else around is destructive. And that is what's going to highlight, or a part of what's going to highlight these men as being more precious than fine gold. Verse 13, therefore I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall remove out of her place in the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and in the day of his fierce anger. And quite literally, you would have this happen, right? As the scriptures, there's other precepts that reference how the earth is going to reel to and fro because of all the force, right? When you have a nuclear missile, right, or an intercontinental ballistic missile, is nothing to be played with. And the constant striking of different parts of the earth with that force is going to cause that shaking. It's going to trigger earthquakes. It's going to cause tsunamis. Okay, it's going to cause that shaking, which is likened here onto the heavens and the earth removing out of her place. And as it reads, in the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and in the day of his fierce anger. So it doesn't need to be that the Most High is going to make a spiritual fist and start punching the earth, but he is going to carry out his wrath and his anger by using the inhabitants of the earth, first to invent these weapons and then to utilize it. Verse 14, and it shall be as a chased roe, and as a sheep that no man taketh up. And a chased roe, if you've ever seen a roe, right, like a, or even like a gazelle or deer or what, they're very quick. And you may see them in a pack, but the second they hear like a lion or a predator in the woodworks, right, or around, they scatter and they dip very quickly. Everybody's hopping every which way to survive. And so now we start to get a quick visual of not just the destruction that is happening, globally, right, where you have the way it's manifesting is with the missiles hitting and so on and so forth. But at the same time, right, we're getting a visual of the more granular level of how things are chaotic and how people, are suffering and how they are sort of interacting as this destruction is taking place. Because we know that according to prophecy, the destruction is going to involve also things like famines, right? And like martial law and like people slaying one another and people fleeing and all of those things. Okay, that's going to be a part of that destruction, and it's going to culminate with that thermonuclear destruction to sort of cleanse, right, and wipe it all off, right, to finalize the anger of the Lord. So as Isaiah is mentioning here in the 14th verse, it's going to be like a chased roe, and as a sheep that no man taketh up, meaning like a sheep without a shepherd, right, that is sort of just like wandering or scattering about without one to guide it or to lead it. And that's what the people are going to be like, scattering left and right, fleeing. Everybody's dipping. As it says, they shall every man turn to his own people and flee everyone into his own land. So as people, which they're already doing it now, but as things start to get worse, people are going to start to, one, band with their own kind, right? And that's what causes that whole like racial tensions, or not just racial, but you know what I mean, like nationality wise, right? People stick to their own people, their own kind, and it causes more friction between people of different kinds, for lack of a better word. And at the same time, a migration back to their own homelands of the various people. Because here in America, you have a conglomerate of different nations over here, right? And they're not all Native Americans. And when I say that, I mean they're not native to the land. I mean, not that the being of the land makes your nationality, but they're not Americans, so to speak. So you have Chinese people that will go back to China, Japanese people that will go back to Japan, right? That's how they flee back to their own lands. Because why did they come here? They didn't come here because they loved the land so much. They came here for to make money, right? They came here for opportunity's sake. And so when they start to see things getting bad over here, then they don't have a reason to stay here. Verse 15, every one that is found shall be thrust through, and every one that is joined unto them shall fall by the sword. So now, right, once again, going back to that visual of you have this army, they invade the city, and now they're going through pretty much just destroying everyone and everything that they see, right? Well, once again, as I mentioned, when these prophecies are fulfilling or taking place in their fullest, you're going to have the missiles being shot, right? But that's on the let's say geopolitical level, right? But if you zoom in to what's actually happening in the land, that's when you see this scenes over here, right? As it says, everyone that is found shall be thrust through. So imagine, people hiding, imagine people breaking into other people's homes. They find somebody, and if you're a man, they'll slay you, they'll stab you up, they'll shoot you, whatever the case is. And as it says, everyone that is joined onto them shall fall by the sword. So if say they come into a house, be it martial law troops or a gang or just some crooks, and they break into a house and they see one person and they're gonna delete this person. Well, if they find somebody else there, then guess what? That other person is also gonna suffer whatever judgment that's that they're trying to bring at that time, right? Verse 16, it says, their children also shall be dashed to pieces before their eyes. And that happening emphasizes what's the word I'm looking for here? Being helpless, right? Because nobody willingly just stands there, right, and just watches their children be put to death or dashed to pieces before their eyes. So for that to happen, it shows you that you're going to have people in a helpless position, right? Be it, you like scenes from The Purge. You get tied up and then they're torturing your family and all this extra kind of stuff. These are all things that will be taking place in that time, which add to it being a time like never before. It says here, their houses shall be spoiled, right? So their houses going to be broken into. And this is also something that was seen by the prophet Ezra in 2nd Ezra, the 15th chapter, right? So their houses shall be spoiled and their wives ravished, meaning to be, taken, right, against their will. And if that happens in a society that all hell hasn't broken in or broken loose yet in, what do you think is going to happen when all hell does break loose? It's going to be like a common place. Like, how a fight can break out or at any point in time. Well, guess what? Cases like this is going to be commonplace because all hell is breaking loose. A woman getting assaulted is going to be the last of people's problems at that time. Meaning, like, when all hell is breaking loose, and like if you watch these post-apocalyptic movies, a woman getting assaulted is not something that everybody stops what they're doing to turn around and say, oh, it's just an outcry and we have to open an investigation. That's not going to be happening in that time. Verse 17, behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it. Now, going into Isaiah 13 and 17, this, like I said, like similar to what I mentioned in the beginning of the lesson, this is dealing prophetically, right? So the Medes here are not talking about the ancient Medes, okay, the descendants of Japheth or Madai. It's not talking about the ancient Medes, right? The Lord here through Isaiah is referring to the Medes, the modern day Medes, or I should say the Medes in prophecy, which are, in this case, the Russians, okay, or Russia. Now, when you go into it historically, the Medes didn't come against Babylon. Okay, when you go into I looked up here, Median territory, what you see here, right, is you have the Median Triangle or the Median Heartland, which is this. You have the Median territory, which they had covered here in purple. And then you have here the Neo-Assyrian Empire, which you have over here. Now, one of the reasons that you don't hear much about the Medes in the scriptures is because, and you hear more so about like Babylon, is because they ruled at the same time, right? They ruled sort of hand in hand, just in different parts. When the Assyrian Empire was taken down, it was taken down by the Babylonians and the Medes, okay? So they worked together to take down the Assyrian Empire. And when the Assyrian Empire was taken down, they didn't go to war with each other. In fact, they had an alliance. If you look at, I believe it was Nebuchadnezzar's wife, she was a Median. All right, if we type that in here, I think her name was Amethyst, Nebuchadnezzar II. See if it shows. Okay, so let's look at children. And maybe it'll show there. Here we go. So one of Nebuchadnezzar's children here being Amel Marduk, if you look at his parents, you have Nebuchadnezzar II, and you have here Amethyst of Media. It says here she was a queen of Babylon, wife of Nebuchadnezzar II, and daughter of Median king Cyaxares. And this was because they ended up, I believe this marriage was an alliance, right? An alliance forming marriage between the Medes and the Babylonians. And that's how you ended up having Nebuchadnezzar marry the daughter of the Median king at the time, Cyaxares, right? But the point here is, well, actually, let's read it right here. It says, Amethyst was the daughter of Cyaxares and the sister of Astyages. So Cyaxares here, being the Median king at the time, along with Nabopolassar, which was the one sort of leading and ruling Babylon at the time, worked together so that they could take down the Assyrians. Okay, and as part of that alliance, since they had a common enemy, they ended up marrying their children, which led to Nebuchadnezzar marrying the daughter of Cyaxares, being Amethyst. And the brother, as it says here, the brother of Amethyst was Astyages, which interestingly enough happens to be Darius the Mede that you read of in Daniel the 5th chapter. So it says here, Amethyst had a niece also named Amethyst from her brother Astyages. Amethyst married Nebuchadnezzar to formalize the alliance between the Babylonian and Median dynasties. Tradition relates that Amethyst, yearning for the forested mountains of Media, led to the construction of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, as Nebuchadnezzar attempted to please her by planting the trees and plants from her homeland. Now, when you go back to the point of this is to show that the Medes didn't come against the Babylonians. And here in Isaiah 13, we're reading about the Lord stirring up the Medes against them being Babylon, right? So if you go into historical times, the Medes and the Babylonians, the Neo-Babylonian Empire, they were actually allied together, right? And somebody might say, well, you know, they might try to make a case and say, oh, well, maybe when it says Medes, it's really referring to the Medo-Persian Empire. But at the time when you had the Medo-Persian Empire, the way it worked was when the Medes were in power, because this territory was a mix, right? You had Persians in here and you had Medes in here. But at the time when the Medes were ruling, they were the upper class over the Persians. And when the Persians came up into power, they were the upper class, right, over the Medes. But these people were still together in that empire, okay? So when you go into Isaiah 13, one, we've seen that it wouldn't make sense for this to be talking about the ancient Medes because they didn't come against Babylon, all right? But also when you look at geographically, the region of Russia today is linked to the region where the ancient Medes dwelt or even migrated from, okay? When you look here, this territory that we're seeing as the Median Empire, this is where they ended up settling, right, and then developed their empire. But the Medes actually migrated from north, Okay, they came down from that same region where you have Russia and Ukraine and all of that is known as the Pontic Caspian Steppe, okay, which is that open plain up north over there. And then eventually they settled over here, and then they came up, or had this empire. However, at this point in time, you still had remnants and like people part of the Medes in this region over here, right, going up north. So I looked up some information here on the Pontic Caspian Steppe. It says here it's a steppe, if I'm pronouncing that right. Let's look at that pronunciation. Oh, steppe. Oh, okay. Looks like I wasn't pronouncing it right.
Steppe.
Yep. So steppe, not steep, steppe. Where are we at? It says here it's a steppe extending across Eastern Europe to Central Asia, formed by the Caspian and Pontic steppes. And then it goes into where it stretches to and so on. And matter of fact, let me just read a little bit of it. It stretches from the northern shores of the Black Sea, the Pontus Euxinus of antiquity, to the northern area around the Caspian Sea, where it ends at the Euro-Caspian narrowing, which joins it with the Kazakh steppe in Central Asia, making it a part of a larger Eurasian steppe. Geopolitically, the Pontic Caspian steppe extends from northeastern Bulgaria and southeastern Romania through Moldova and eastern Ukraine, through the North Caucasus of southern Russia, and into the lower Volga region, where it straddles the border of southern Russia and western Kazakhstan. Okay, now this Pontic Caspian steppe, I bring this up being the region where it also includes parts of Russia, because when you go historically, I looked this up, right, that the Medes come from the Pontic Caspian steppe. It says here, yes, there's a strong historical connection between the Medes and the Pontic Caspian steppe. The Medes and Indo-Iranian people are believed to have originated in the Eurasian steppe, which includes the Pontic Caspian steppe. They later migrated to the Iranian plateau, where they established the kingdom of Media. And then also I looked up here, is Russia part of the Pontic Caspian steppe? It says here, yes, parts of Russia are included within the Pontic Caspian steppe, specifically the southern federal district of Russia, including the North Caucasus region, is located on the Pontic Caspian steppe. Okay, so the point of this is that geographically, there is an association or a link between where the Medes used to dwell and migrated from, right, into where they established their empire and where Russia is today, right? And so if you are, imagine if you are looking at a vision and you're seeing people from a particular land or a particular region being, a key player going up against people from another land or a particular region, sometimes it's not always that the people dwelling in that land are the original or native inhabitants of that land, but they just so happen to be the people within that region when you saw whatever it is you saw, right? So I say that, and the example I'm giving is today, if you had like somebody say, oh, I had a dream that the Americans, right, I don't know, invaded India, right? Just to throw that out there, right? I had a dream that the Americans invaded India. Well, the Americans invaded India. The Americans would be determined by what time period did you have this dream about? Because the Americans during the 1500s look very different than the Americans today, right? If you say Americans today, you're talking about somebody that is Chinese could be classified in there. You have Edomites that are classified in there. You have Israelites that are in there that today they would look at them as Americans. When they say Americans today, they're really referring to people in the land of America. Okay. And likewise, when you go back 1500s and prior, where you had the Native Americans, as they call them, right? The Northern Kingdom in the land, they would be known as the Americans if if the land was called America at the time, they would be known as the Americans, right? So when you come into Isaiah 13 and 17, just because it says Medes here doesn't mean that it's referring to the actual descendants of Media, but rather those who are in that territory or that region at this time. And those that are in that territory or that are in that region that are going to play this role of coming against Babylon are Russia. Okay, and of course the neighboring nations that are allied to it, but primarily Russia, because they're going to be that main enemy that the Lord is going to stir up against Babylon. So I just gave all that for some extra context. Not that you necessarily need it, right? Because we believe this according to prophecy and faith, that this is what it means, but just for extra context for those that are interested in it. As it says here, which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it. So what that's saying is, when the Lord stirs up, which he's doing now, the minds of Russia, right, or the Medes here, as it's worded, he's going to put into their minds to where they're going to be at the point of they're ready for war. And at that point, no silver or gold, which silver and gold in this case would be used as means of like forming peace or a treaty. But the Lord is saying here, they're not going to delight in it. So you can't buy them off, and you can't basically subdue them with money, because the Lord is going to have put it into their minds to be ready for war. Verse 18, their bows also shall dash the young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb, which are the children. Their eyes shall not spare children. So when they get into that mindset that, okay, it's time to go all out against this place, right? When that evil thought comes into their mind, as it is written in Ezekiel 38, and Salaki, if I said 37 before when referring to Russia, I meant Ezekiel 38. When that evil thought comes into their mind and they're ready to shoot those missiles here, they're not going to stop to reconsider and say, oh, there are children over there, or there are women over there. Let us not do this. And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency, shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. And when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah, he destroyed it, right, with fire and brimstone from the heavens. That's not what happened when ancient Babylon went down. Verse 20, it shall never be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. And that's definitely not the case with ancient Babylon. And these are key verses that signify that what Isaiah is seeing here is prophetic, right? This isn't something that, I'm saying prophetic even in our time. This isn't something that happened during the time in ancient history. And as it says here, neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there, neither shall the shepherds make their fold there. Meaning the land is going to be uninhabitable for people to move and basically form society or civilization or rebuild it back. Verse 21, but wild beasts of the desert shall lie there. Now, why would wild beasts of the desert lie in a city, right? Or a setting with people? Because there's not going to be people and there's not going to be city. It's just going to be a desert, right? After that fire dies down. And their houses shall be full of doleful creatures. So where their houses used to be is no longer going to be houses and buildings. And owls shall dwell there, and satyrs shall dance there. And when you go into that word satyrs, it goes into, let's go in here. So they have it here as hairy, a he-goat. A satyr may refer to a demon-possessed goat like the swine of Gadara. But it's the same word that is used for goat, right, throughout the scriptures. Or here, as it says, hairy. But as you can see here, dealing with like a goat or a kid. And when you look up like a satyr in the actual image, they just show you, if anybody's seen like Hercules, that his mentor, so satyr. If you look at his mentor in Hercules, right, where he's like half goat, half human, horn, all of that, that's sort of like that mythical creature / image that they attribute to to like a Seder, but I would probably just go with likely like a goat or something like that. And the reason in being, keep in mind that North America gets destroyed, right? But you still have like South, Central America, and maybe possibly even Canada that is not like fully destroyed. And so as the fire dies down, if you still have like life, animals, whatever, in like some of these neighboring territories, as it says, that's how they end up coming into the land, right? That's how they end up creeping into the land, and that's how you have like owls and desert creatures dwelling here, because the land is going to be a lake of fire. So whatever is here is going to die. So how do you end up having desert creatures or wild beasts of the desert lying here? They got to come from somewhere, right? So it says here, and satyrs shall dance there, and the wild beasts of the islands shall cry in their desolate houses, and dragons. And when it says dragons, it's not like dragons from Game of Thrones kind of dragons, but more like like reptilian like creatures in their pleasant palaces, and her time is near to come, and her days shall not be prolonged. So basically, this place is going to be turned into a habitation of desert creatures and devils. And who knows, right? You might even have friggin' certain demons roaming around in here. But as it says, her pleasant palaces and her time is near to come. So the time for this judgment or this destruction to come upon Babylon is close, and her days shall not be prolonged, right? So it's not going to take long before this judgment gets fulfilled, and now more so than ever. And before we close it out, let me do a quick reference here. Let's see here. I think there was on there's because there are a couple other precepts. Yeah, there it is, right? Isaiah 34, which is also a precept that links with Isaiah 13 here, right? The wild beasts of the desert shall also meet with the wild beasts of the island, and the satyr shall cry to his fellow, and the screech owl also shall rest there and find for herself a place of rest, right? And when you go into the 13th verse, it goes into the same thing. So this is a vision that Isaiah saw, right, and described even in different chapters over here, even in Revelation 18 as well, which Revelation 18, once again, is talking about the destruction of Babylon. Now, what's interesting here is it says in Revelation 18:2, right, and he cried with a mighty voice, or he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird, right? Now, this is synonymous with what Isaiah saw. But the thing is, John sees this during the Roman Empire, which is hundreds of years after the Babylonian or the Neo-Babylonian Empire had fallen. So what Babylon is he referring to here that is suffering the same judgment as the Babylon that Isaiah saw and referenced in his vision? Right, so that's why I mentioned that maybe you might have some demons even roaming in here, because when you go into that word devils, I think even the foul spirit, it goes into that, right? An inferior deity, an evil spirit, a demon, right? Nonetheless, that pretty much is the point of Isaiah 13, right? It was a vision that Isaiah received concerning the judgments that would come upon Babylon the Great, not ancient Babylon, but the Babylon in prophecy, which is America. So with that, Lord willing, you edified. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Recha Kodesh. And until next time, Shalom.